Welcome back. In this video, we'll be focusing on the religion of Islam. The big questions you should be able to answer after watching this video are first, what are the origins of Islam and how did it spread? And then what are the beliefs, traditions, and customs of Muslims? So what are the origins of Islam and how did it spread? So Islam is the second most widely practiced religion in the world today after Christianity. Islam is based upon the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. So he is the founder in the same way that Jesus of Nazareth is the founder of Christianity, and Siddhartha Gautama is the founder of Buddhism, and Abraham is the founder of Judaism, and you should be able to make some comparisons between each of those founders. Muhammad was born in Mecca around 570 CE. Now note the date, important here. We're right around the year 600, which is one of those turning point dates in AP World History, moving out of period 2 and into period 3, and it's really this event, the beginnings of the religion of Islam and its ultimate spread, that is the reason why 600 CE is chosen. Otherwise, you may have chosen something more like 500, which is closer to the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 CE. So Muhammad is born in Mecca. So what is Mecca like? Mecca is on the Arabian Peninsula. It's not a part of any major empire. There were other major empires at the time. The Byzantine Empire, which was what was left of the Eastern Roman Empire, and the Sassanid Persian Empire. Now the Arabian Peninsula was politically decentralized. There were a number of warring clans or tribes that were fighting with one another at the time of Muhammad's birth. So within Mecca, there was a shrine called the Kaaba, and this was a room filled with statues of local gods. These pastoral people, many of them were polytheists, but there were also other people who practiced monotheism. There would be Jews, there would be Zoroastrians living in Mecca, all as a result of its central trading spot. Muhammad at a young age, about age 6, was orphaned. Both his parents died. And this is going to play a key role later on in his life as he begins developing some ideas about social justice and charity. Now, he married into a wealthy merchant family. His wife, Khadija, was an extremely well-to-do merchant. And so Muhammad himself was a merchant. And this is also going to become very important as in the Islamic faith, trade and the role of merchants is more heavily valued than maybe in some other societies that we studied, especially like China, where under Confucianism, merchants are viewed less favorably. Around age 40, Muhammad has an experience when he's up in the caves above the city of Mecca, and he receives word from an angel Gabriel that he is a prophet and that he is a messenger of God, and the Arabic word for God is Allah. And so Muhammad begins preaching monotheism around 610 CE, and he incorporates various aspects of Judaism, Christianity, Zoroastrianism, all of those various traditions which were practiced by people within the region. And so he, in some respects, he serves as sort of a unifying force, bringing these various clans and people together who all practice these various religious traditions in a way that sort of unifies them. Now, he received revelations that ultimately formed the basis for the Quran, and the Quran is different than other holy texts that we've studied in this class because it is the direct revelations of God, as opposed to the books of the New Testament, which are accounts of the life of Jesus. The Quran is the direct word from God. Like other monotheistic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, the Quran has very strong elements of social justice within it, and therefore, not surprisingly, the authorities of Mecca began to become distrustful of Muhammad, right? He threatened their power in this exact same way that Jesus threatened the authority of the Roman Empire in Judea. And so Muhammad was kicked out of Mecca. He and some of his followers made a journey to Medina in 622 CE. This is considered year 1 in the Islamic calendar. This journey is known as the Hijra. So these Muslims were forced to move. So they were being persecuted in much the same way that early Christians were being persecuted in the Roman Empire. Now, once they were in Medina, they began to consolidate under the power of Muhammad. And eventually Muhammad is going to lead his followers back to Mecca in 629 CE in a event that's known in the Islamic tradition as the Hajj. And there is going to be a series of wars fought between these Muslims. Muslim is a word that means those who submit to the word of God. And the Meccans, ultimately the Muslims win, despite in many of these battles being dramatically outnumbered. And this is seen by many Muslims as evidence that God is ultimately on their side. So Muhammad is going to then unify these various warring Bedouin clans, which were scattered throughout the Arabian Peninsula, by gaining support as both a spiritual leader and a political leader through various policies. So we mentioned before that he was orphaned, and he is going to profess this message about social justice, about charity, about support for the poor. He's also going to have pro-merchant policies, and again, a lot of the wealthy people on the Arabian Peninsula at the time were merchants, as Arabia was connected to the Indian Ocean and the Silk Road trade networks. Also, religious toleration. Muhammad is not going to force conversion upon non-believers. So in this region, again, there are Jews, there are Zoroastrians, there are Christians living in this region. And so he is going to express ideals of religious toleration for those people whom he sees connections with. Also, military conquest. So ultimately, Muhammad, as a political leader, is going to expand his empire and is going to use military power and prowess to do so. So ultimately, he's going to create a unified community of Muslims, and there's a word for this, the Ummah, right? This unified community of Muslims, which starts out in the Arabian Peninsula and eventually is going to spread to other parts of the Middle East, North Africa, India, Spain. When we think about the life of Muhammad and some of the similarities between the spread of Islam and, let's say, Christianity, one of the differences is that in the Islamic tradition, Muhammad was both a spiritual leader and a political leader. In that sense, he was basically similar to, in the Christian tradition, to Jesus as the spiritual leader. But remember, Jesus was separate from the real political leader who ultimately gave authority to Christianity, who was Constantine. So in Muhammad, he's really playing both of these roles. Now, why this is important is because in the Islamic tradition, they don't have that same separation between the church and the state as we see in the Western tradition. Those two institutions, the religious institution and the institution of the state, are really melded in the Islamic world. And part of that is just the nature of their history, in the sense that Muhammad was both a political and a spiritual leader. At Muhammad's death, this is the extent of Islamic control. So recall, there are these two major empires on its border, the Sassanid Persians and the Byzantines, who had been fighting amongst one another. And ultimately, it's the weakness of both of these empires that is going to be one of the reasons why the Islamic empire is going to be able to spread. They're going to conquer the Sassanids and weaken and take part of the Byzantine Empire. So the Islam initially spread mainly through military conquest of the Islamic Empire, through the conquering of the Arabian Peninsula and these various warring tribes, through Persia, through parts of the Byzantine Empire in North Africa. But the religion of Islam is going to spread well beyond the boundaries of the Islamic Empire. So you can see from this map here, you can see the boundaries of the Islamic Empire, and then in pink, where Islam is the primary religion in the world today. How did Islam spread outside the boundaries of the empire? Well, it was through the activities of merchants and missionaries who spread Islam along the Silk Road in much the same way that Buddhism and Christianity were spread along the Silk Road. And also along the Indian Ocean sea lanes, Muslim merchants became the dominant players in the Indian Ocean region, and also along the Trans-Saharan trade network, so moving Islam from North Africa to West Africa. Islam was spread outside the empire by merchants and missionaries who spread the religion along trade routes such as the Silk Road, the Indian Ocean, the Trans-Saharan trade networks, and this is a very critical aspect of period 3. And why does this matter today? Well, if you think about what country today has the largest Muslim population, it's actually Indonesia, which is down here as a result of conversion via the Indian Ocean sea lanes. So we oftentimes associate Islam with the region of the Middle East, but in actuality, nearly 62% of Muslims live in either the region of South Asia or Southeast Asia. Only around 20% of Muslims live in the Middle East or in North Africa. When we talk about the spread of Islam, not only was it the role that merchants played, but it was also the role that missionaries played. And within Islam, there is a branch or a sect of Islam known as Sufism. This is sort of the inward-looking, mystical dimension of Islam, emphasizing more of the personal and emotional worship. So they were very much about having a direct connection with God. So Sufi missionaries were very effective in spreading Islam. What are the beliefs, traditions, and customs of Muslims?
I'm God.
Muslims believe in the same God, Allah, which is the Arabic word for God, that Christians and Jews do. They also believe in many of the same prophets as Jews and Christians, such as Adam and Abraham and Moses. Because there was such a close connection, right? We oftentimes are more likely to fight with people with whom we have common connections. Now, Muslims believe Jesus was in fact a prophet, but they do not believe that he was the Messiah. They don't believe that he was the Son of God. They do not believe in the concept of the Trinity. In fact, Muslims are very much devoutly monotheistic, right? There is only one God. Muhammad was not a god. Muhammad was simply a human who received revelations from God. So Muslims believe Muhammad was the final prophet through whom Allah delivered his laws or his message. The Quran constitutes the Islamic holy book. These are the words of Allah as revealed to Muhammad. And so the Quran is the primary text of the Islamic faith. However, there are supplementary or secondary texts as well, known as the Hadiths. These are sayings or stories about the life of the Prophet Muhammad. We in the Western world have this separation between our religion and our government, right? We like to think about this as a wall of separation. In the Islamic world, those two things are combined. So in the Islamic world, we're really talking about more of theocratic governments, right? Ruled by God through these religious leaders. And one way they do this is through the promotion of Sharia law. So Sharia law are these moral and religious laws of Islam. They derive out of the Quran and the various hadiths. Now, at the core of Islam are what's known as the 5 pillars. These are required duties for all Muslims, and they ultimately establish a moral and ethical code in a very similar way in which the 10 Commandments did in Judaism and Christianity, and the Eightfold Path did in Buddhism. So the first pillar is faith. Muslims must declare there is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. And you see this connection between church and state, for example, in the flag of Saudi Arabia, which has the statement, there is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet, written in Arabic text. You can also see it here in the flag of Afghanistan. So it's essentially as if we in the United States on our flag had something written about God, right? That is how intertwined the church and state is in the Islamic world. So the second pillar is prayer, and all Muslims must pray 5 times a day, facing the direction of the Grand Mosque and the Kaaba in Mecca. So prayer really served as a unifying force, bringing together Muslims worldwide in this sort of community of believers, or the Ummah. The third pillar is almsgiving or charity. So you have to give 2.5% of your total wealth to charity. That's consistent with the social justice teachings of Muhammad. Now, from sunrise to sunset during the holy month of Ramadan, Muslims must fast. So fasting during the month of Ramadan, and fasting means no eating, no drinking, no smoking, no swearing, no sexual relations. The fifth pillar is the Hajj. You must, as a Muslim, make a pilgrimage to Mecca once during their lifetime. There is this holy ceremony that takes place in Mecca where millions of people descend upon the city of Mecca during this week, and they make this pilgrimage. And at the center, here's the Grand Mosque. At the very center of the Grand Mosque, there's the Kaaba, to which Muslims are all facing. So the big questions as a result of watching this video are, first, what are the origins of Islam and how did it spread? And second, what are the beliefs, traditions, and customs of Muslims? Thanks for watching.